Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Dani Phantom. Okay, so this episode, Kindred Spirits, finally reveals why Vlad gave Valerie her ghost hunting suit. It's essentially the reveal is that Vlad is trying to clone Dani. That is essentially what the episode is. So the episode opens up with Vlad going through a list of various footage and other things from he's watching a bunch of other footage and other things that Valerie had recorded on her body cam for her ghost hunting suit, which ultimately he's been using to study Dani and try and make the perfect clone of him. And we do wind up seeing that, but it gets to this point where he points out that he's still missing one piece, and we also find out that Vlad has actually programmed the AI that runs his computer to be a spitting image of Maddie, which is a little bit creepy, but also in character for him. But he of course insists that he's missing one final piece, and realizing he needs to figure out what that is. But also kind of having a good idea of what that is, he then proceeds to wake up the clones, and we see the clones. They are, well, essentially various misshapen versions of Dani. We don't, essentially that's what's established. But in case he then proceeds to send them off to go and find Dani, so that he can, transform it, so he can finish making the clones and making them look perfect. And of course, they leave muttering a "yes, father," which he admits he does quite like the sound of. And it's at this point where he then proceeds to ask the Maddie AI he created to say what he programmed it to say. At which point he just repeats, "I love you, Jack, as a moron," over and over, while he maniacally laughs. But in case it is at this point where Dani is revealed to have taken Sam and Tucker to the golf course, and they are, well, essentially they're visibly frustrated. First and foremost, Dani is using his ghost powers to screw with Tucker by supposedly showing up late, and it's real that he shows up late. He uses his ghost powers to kind of make Tucker whiff his ball a whole bunch, because Tucker's bragging about how if he gets this next shot on the 18th hole, then he'll have successfully beaten Sam at the game of golf. But of course, Dani proceeds to screw with him, enabling Sam to beat him pretty easily. But it's this point where Sam asks Dani where he's been, and he proceeds to claim that he had a fight that was going a lot longer than it should have. But when she and Tucker see the right through that, he admits that he just overslept. And it's at this point where we find out that they're a little bit annoyed at Dani, because as we find out, Dani has been treating them more like sidekicks rather than friends lately, and admit that every time they get into some sort of scrap or anything, they're always the one to take the fall, while Dani has to just kind of leaves and cleans up the mess. And Dani then proceeds to ask them one time when he's done that. At which point we proceed to see a montage of Dani fighting several ghosts that we've seen before. I believe Skulker, the Lunch Lady, and a couple of others. But essentially we proceed to see a montage where Dani does exactly that. He's in the middle of fighting a ghost, and he will just he and Sam and Tucker will just wind up taking the fall for it. They'll wind up getting badly injured or whatever, or wind up getting stepped on in the Lunch Lady's ghost case. And eventually Dani points out that they've made their point. So he admits that he promises that he'll never do it again. Which of course they remark sounds like a broken record, pointing out that they've heard it before, and he's obviously has not learned his lesson before now. But he says Dani is of course trying to like plead to them that he's trying to be a better friend. With them pointing out that they feel like they're being taken for granted. It's at this point where the first of the ghosts, the bedsheet ghost, who we've already seen, so I'm not going to picture him again. But the bedsheet ghost shows up and attacks Dani, and of course Dani at this point just kind of just blows off his friends to go fight the ghost, which of course they're annoyed about, because obviously Dani has promised that he would be a better friend, and he hasn't. But he proceeds to fly off and battle the bedsheet ghost, and also points out, and also does mock the bedsheet ghost, pointing out that's what kind of ghost it is that's wearing the sheet. At which point he pulls the sheet off to reveal a skeleton underneath. with the skeleton ghost then proceeding to pummel him, and in the process destroying the miniature golf course that they're on. But he then proceeds to demand that Dani change back, and Dani, noting that something very strange, does decide to fight the ghost off, which of course confuses him very heavily, pointing out that he has no idea why the ghost wants him to change back, but realizes that if he changes back there, his secret will explode. So he of course leaves Sam and Tucker to clean up the mess, because unfortunately Dani's fight accidentally destroyed the miniature golf course, and the manager is not happy about it. So he makes them clean it up, and of course, this is this point where Dani proceeds to return home, where he can safely transform back into his human mode, but then quickly discovers a girl sitting on his bed, who he has no idea where he came from, and he's on the phone call with Tucker, trying to apologize in the meantime. But and of course they're upset because they have to clean up the entire miniature golf course, while he just kind of takes whatever mess it meaning he just kind of leaves. But of course, Dani proceeds to hang up, which of course causes Sam to snap at him, wondering what else is new. At which point he just proceeds to wonder who this girl is, and the girl proceeds to introduce herself as Danielle, which of course he's a little confused about, and wonders who he is, but she explains that she is supposedly his cousin. She explains that she's like his cousin three times removed or something like that, and of course Dani is not entirely sure what she's doing there or why she's doing there. So, but of course, it does note that they do like a lot of the same things, which, of course, Dani also, once again, notes is weird, and, but quickly realizes that Danielle most likely ran away from home, which, of course, confuses him. So he, of course, asks the girl to if it was all that obviously he believes her parents are looking for her, so he volunteers to bring her downstairs to talk to his parents to figure out what's going on. But she is insistent that she not leave, and refuses to come out of his room. And of course, Dani admits that he doesn't really have time with this, but it's this point where his ghost sense goes off, and he discovers the second of the clones, the Frankenstein ghost, which looks, like Dani but muscular, which of course grabs him and immediately tries to fight him, and Dani of course goes to try and fight back, but it quickly seemingly has him pinned into a corner. But and of course it's at this point where Danielle tells Dani that he's not he of course insists that she leave, but she points out that she just found Dani and she's not going anywhere. At which point Danielle reveals that she can go ghost, which confuses the hell out of Dani. But not really. But of course, asking him if he would rather ask questions or fight, he chooses to fight, and they proceed to successfully take care of the Frankenstein ghost, which turns into a pile of ectoplasm, same as the first one that they fought. And this of course makes Dani very visibly confused. But it's at this point where he tries to ask Danielle a bunch of questions, only for her to suddenly disappear, and he is of course confused as to where she went. So So the next day, he of course comes to the lunch table to sit down and ask Sam and Tucker what's going on. But they are visibly not in the mood, because they just cleaned up and pieced a miniature golf course back together from scratch yesterday. So they're of course not really interested in what anything Dani has to say, because they're really pissed at him. So of course Dani once again apologizes, promising he'll do better, but they then proceed to claim excuses, pointing out that he sounds like a broken record. But in case he then proceeds to try and explain, pointing out that he's very confused because he has a superpowered cousin that he didn't know existed until previously. And right on cue, she then proceeds to emerge from the table using her ghost powers, which causes Tucker and Sam's food trays to immediately fly into their faces. But of course, Dani tells her not to do that, pointing out that obviously she's in the middle of a public place. She shouldn't be doing that, because it would, expose her ghost secret. And of course, she proceeds to change back, but also admits that it was funny, and admits that Dani should have found it funny. But of course, Dani is just visibly frustrated at her. But it's at this point where the third of the clones, the mini ghost, then proceeds to fly in, and is an incredibly tiny little ghost, as it looks kind of like a fairy. But He proceeds to fly through and completely tears up the place. And of course, Dani and Danielle immediately have to switch into their ghost modes to fight back against it, and of course try to fight back, which winds up trashing the cafeteria. And of course, Dani has no idea where this third ghost actually came from, but it's at this point where Danielle points out that all he has to do is follow it, and the truth will be revealed. Which, of course, Dani at this point proceeds to leave and go follow it, which, once again, leaves Sam and Tucker holding the bag, because Mr. Lancer comes in, and he quickly discovers all the mess and other things, and once again, and of course, Dash is quick to blame Sam and Tucker when he shows up, because obviously he knows that he just points out that they were the ones who did it, because they were the ones who he believes trashed the place. So of course Mr. Lancer forces them to clean up the entirety of the school cafeteria, which is a problem for them. But it's in any case at this point where Dani proceeds to follow the pixie ghost up through the buildings, when he suddenly encounters Vlad, who immediately corners him and attacks him. Which, of course, Dani wonders what Vlad is doing there, Vlad proceeds to point out that he's not really in any mood for the usual tricks, and does proceed to brutally attack Dani, which of course he's confused as to what's exactly going on. But it's this point where Danielle shows up, and Dani is of course confused as to what's going on, but asks for her help, and she remarks that she'll absolutely be helping him, but be helping all right. But it's at this point where it's revealed that Danielle is a clone as well, and she proceeds to attack Dani and knock him out. At which point she asks her daddy if she did good, which of course she responds that she did excellent. Which Dani is just visibly confused, but also then proceeds to pass out. At which point, of course, Sam and Tucker proceed to come out with trash bags full of stuff that they needed to clean up from the house, from the cafeteria. And of course they're once again upset with Dani for making them hold the bag. And this is literally in this case, but it's at this point. But of course, they do want to give Dani a piece of their mind once they see him. But then they see Dani being scooped up by Vlad with Danielle in tow, and they leave. And of course, they immediately realize that something's wrong, and that they realize that Dani is most likely in danger, and they need to go save him. Which, of course, they don't get the opportunity to do so, because Mr. Lancer immediately shows up and demands to know why they're not in the cafeteria still cleaning up. So it's at this point where they just proceed to tell him straight. Sam tells them that they're going to be leaving the ditch school to go look for Dani, while Tucker proceeds to tell Mr. Lancer that, in his own words, there's nothing you can do about it, old man. Which of course pisses Mr. Lancer off immensely, and he proceeds to try and chase after him. But sure enough, Tucker is kind of right, because Mr. Lancer throws out his back trying to catch them. So that's what happens ultimately. And of course, it's this point where Dani is of course dragged off to Vlad's chalet in the mountains, where he proceeds to trap Dani in the same trap that Skulker designed for him way back when. And of course, it's this point where Vlad then proceeds to explain exactly what's happening, about how he's been trying to use Dani. Dani of course notes that Vlad seems to be very obviously wants him for something if he's kidnapped him, and Vlad proceeds to explain that yes, he has in fact. And of course, Dani kind of does figure it out a little bit, pointing out that he's noted that all of the ghosts are seemingly clones for him. Case in point, the shrunken ghost then is revealed to be a facsimile of Dani, but all multi-faced. And of course, Dani points out that that is indeed correct. And Dani pointing out that he is seriously one messed up Fruit Loop to create some sort of horrifying Frankenstein clones. But it's this point where Vlad kind of flies off the handle at him, pointing out that if he were a Fruit Loop, he wouldn't be able to, commit a bunch of bank robberies without anybody noticing, and use his ghost powers to overshadow enough billionaires to make himself rich and create a massive empire, and insists that he is not a Fruit Loop. But does admit that he understands that none of the clones are perfect. Obviously, that's why he kidnaps Dani. He explains that in order to successfully complete one of his clones, he needs Dani to be in the middle of a morph so that he can finally fully complete the clone. which of course, at which point he demonstrates his prime clone, which again looks exactly like Dani, and he proceeds to explain that once they do that, their prime clone can be stabilized and he can finally have the perfect son. Vlad, of course, is unaware, though, that Danielle was using her ghost powers to spy on them during this entire conversation, and starts to believe that Vlad does not care about her. And of course, it is at this point where Sam and Tucker then proceed to sneak into Dani's house to steal the Phantom speeder, so that they can get to Dani and find out where he is. And they also steal the boomerang as well. So because as they point out, it's still locked onto his genetic signature from when they used it in the Ultimate Enemy. It's still tracking where Dani is. So they decide that they're going to need that. But of course we find out that obviously Mr. Lancer has called called Jack and Maddie and let them know what happened about how Sam and Tucker ditched school and have seemingly done so with Dani. Which, of course, causes them to immediately barge down to the basement once they realize somebody's there, and demand to know where their son is, and point out that they're in a lot of trouble once they call their parents. But and of course, this is this point where of course Sam proceeds to tell them that they can't hear him over the sound of the roaring jets. At which point she closes up the thing, and Tucker actually activates the roaring jets. At which point they fly out a little escape tunnel in the basement that is designed for the Phantom speeder, and it's at this point where Sam proceeds to throw the boomerang and tells it to find Dani. And of course they then proceed to Tucker proceeds to follow after it. Meanwhile, Dani is of course had been put in a pod to force him into a morph so that they can actually get him to do a morph. But of course, what we quickly find out is that Dani is resisting the morph, and the Maddie AI tells him that he seems to be resisting and tries to turn it up to force Dani to morph. But Dani eventually blows the machine out and is eventually able to escape, with Vlad cursing his name and realizing he needs Dani to finish. He of course immediately is angry, but then discovers Dani is behind him, and of course Dani proceeds to confront him about what she heard, about pointing out that she's been trying to figure out that she obviously heard that he believes that Dani is that she believes that she's just a mistake, and Danielle has insisted that obviously Vlad has another clone, but that he favors more. But Vlad proceeds to point out that he claims that he cares about her, claiming that he's going to use the morph to stabilize Danielle, which of course Danielle doesn't fully buy, but he does insist that if she brings Dani back, then he'll be able to finally stabilize Danielle and sends her to go get him. So she proceeds to go through the valet to find him, and of course Dani is trying to escape, pointing out that he needs to find some place to hide, but is at this point where Danielle shows up and immediately attacks Dani and demands that he return back to the pod. But Dani then proceeds to point out that they don't have to be enemies, pointing out that they fought each other, that he's fought the other clones before, and every other time they turned into ectoplasmic goo. And points out that Danielle is obviously if Danielle continues to overexert her ghost powers, she will most likely share the same fate as them. Which, of course, Danielle just proceeds to undo her ghost powers and returns to semi-solid state. But of course, at this point, where Dani points out that he also proceeds to tell her that Vlad doesn't really care about her, pointing out that in his own words, she's just another mess that Vlad isn't going to clean up. Which, of course, she demands Dani's a liar for that, and proceeds to blast him. At which point, she proceeds to knock Dani out and brings Dani back down to the basement and puts him back in the pod to test his morphing and make sure that he turns into a morph. But of course, we find out that Vlad then proceeds to insist that Danielle just use the dial to force Dani into a morph so that they can finally finish the device. And of course, she points out that she's a little hesitant. So he then proceeds to become more insistent with her, pointing out that she was made to do as he says. So she should listen to him. At which point, she realizes Dani was right and insists that Vlad isn't the boss of her. At which point, he proceeds to use it to turn the dial all the way off, and Dani proceeds to escape out of it. And of course, Vlad is of course wondering why she would disobey him, but it's at this point where Dani proceeds to escape from his confinement and goes ghost. But of course, Vlad proceeds to tell Danielle that he knows that Danielle won't be able to fight him, pointing out that one more use of his ghost powers will permanently destabilize her. But of course, he proceeds to point. Of course, at this point where Dani points out that there is no need for that, at which point he tells Danielle to get behind him, and uses his ghostly will to destroy the entirety of the laboratory. This, of course, winds up draining Dani as per usual, but it does wind up completely destroying the laboratory, with Vlad being unable to finish his clones now. And this, of course, causes the prime clone to destabilize, much to Vlad's anger. And he proceeds, and of course, it's also adding insult to injury. The Manny AI that he created then proceeds to tell him that it never loved him, and that it loves the Jack program. At which point, a program of Jack shows up, which is funny. But of course, Vlad is angry that Dani destroyed his entire lab. Well, Dani points out that he's now out of power, but admits that it was worth it to take Vlad's cloning lab down. And of course, it is this point where Vlad tries to again attack Dani and Danielle, but Danielle is prepared to waste herself to take down Vlad, but turns out she doesn't need to, because at that exact moment, Vlad gets beamed in the back of the head with the boomerang, and shortly after, Sam and Tucker, with Tucker having not paid attention because he was kind of admiring the clouds while driving, winds up plowing into the basement and winds up knocking Vlad into a wall. And it's at this point where of course, Tucker proceeds to pull out the ghost belt, the Phantom deflector blow to trap Vlad and keep him from turning back into his human mode and to go back into his ghost mode. And Vlad is of course pissed off, but pointing out that he can't use his ghost powers. But it's at this point where Danielle points out that if he can't use his ghost powers, then she doesn't need to use them either. At which point she knocks him out with her fist, just punches him straight in the face. And of course, it's at this point where Dani realizes that his friends came to get him, and of course they point out that obviously they obviously don't expect him to be grateful for it. But it's this point where Dani then proceeds to pull them into a fierce bear hug, and proceeds to thank them relentlessly and repeatedly, pointing out that he will never take them for granted again. And of course, they just point out that it's okay, pointing out that they're his friends. That's what they're supposed to do. But in case at this point where Danielle leaves, pointing out that she's obviously happy that Dani has helped her, take down Vlad and finally find herself, and she leaves. But of course, it's at this point where Sam and Tucker point out that Danielle obviously needs to come with them, pointing out that they're going to be in a lot of trouble otherwise. And sure enough, they then proceed to arrive back at Dani's house, where it is revealed that yes, Jack, Maddie, and Mr. Lancer, who showed up, are obviously very pissed about the fact that the three of them cut school. And of course, Maddie then proceeds to tell them that she's going to call their parents, but it's at this point where her eyes suddenly turn green, and she remarks that there is no real reason for them to call their parents anyway, which pointing out that it's probably fine. But it's at this point where Mr. Lancer is a little confused, but then his eyes suddenly turn green and points out that yeah, it'll probably be fine, and also tells Jack not to worry about the damage done to the Fenton speeder, pointing out that he can always prepare to make a better one. And of course, Jack, being clueless about what's going on, leaves to go do exactly that. Which, Mr. Lancer and Maddie are also very visibly confused. But since they said a thing that they didn't realize they said, but they just kind of send Dani and his friends up to the room, seemingly without punishment. And of course, it's at this point where Sam points out that they're very lucky that Dani figured out how to overshadow somebody from a distance. But Dani admits that he didn't do any of it. At which point, Danielle shows up and reveals that she was the one who did. And proceeds to explain that from now on, her name is going to be Dani with an I. So and points out that of course she knows that her quote-unquote cousin will eventually see her again as she leaves. And now realizing that they're no longer in trouble, they then proceed to go outside, where Dani once again profusely thanks them for coming to get them again. And, of course, they point out that it's fine, and they eventually start getting annoyed with him because he is, of course, continuing to thank them profusely, and they kind of liked when they were being ignored and being taken advantage of, ironically enough, which is somewhat ironically what happens. But it is the episode that ends with Danielle proceeding to fly off into the sunset, and we don't see her until at least the next season. So we don't see her for a while after this point. But in case, yeah, this is a fun episode. So of course, this episode reveals that Dani now has a quote-unquote cousin who is also a half ghost, and she has, of course, obviously has her ghost power. She is able to, has ghost power. She, of course, was created by Vlad, but it's also finally does confirm that Valerie was unwittingly helping Vlad collect data of Dani to create clones. That is ultimately what Vlad was using Valerie and her ghost hunting equipment for. She knew that by giving Valerie ghost hunting equipment and fostering her desire to hunt ghosts, he would ultimately be able to get somebody who could watch Dani repeatedly and get enough data to create a new clone. I kind of like the idea of that. And of course, he didn't wind up getting it right, because the only one he wound up making that's kind of worked was Danielle, who obviously is not completely stable, and I'm sure that'll come up at a later point when it's revealed that Danielle is obviously Danielle's obviously a ticking time bomb, because using her ghost powers is going to slowly cause her to revert into ectoplasm. That of course is a thing that is eventually going to have to be addressed at a later point in the season, in the series. And there's only another handful of episodes left, so they will come up at some point or another. It has to. But in any case, that is going to do it for my review of Dani Phantom. I do quite like this episode. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks down in my way of saying thanks, so be sure to check those out. Links down in the description. And also, be sure to go and check out my Discord if you want to help support the show even further. We are going to be doing a horror movie watch-along at the end of the month, so please go... Well, it is the end of the month, but at the end of the week, we're going to be doing a horror movie watch-along. I haven't decided on the day yet. I have to message some people about that, but I hope you guys will go and check that out. I would appreciate it if you did. And also, be sure to go and check out my Discord. Obviously, go check out my Patreon. It helps support me as well. I would appreciate that. Again, only a couple bucks a month. Please go do that. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Well, the top playlist, I should say. Top playlist what I did for my birthday last year. So go check that one out. That was Megas Month. Would appreciate if you were to go check that one out. Well, the bottom video, the bottom playlist, Courage Month, is a bit more aligned with what we did. We reviewed horror movies. We actually played a bunch of horror games. We reviewed Courage the Cowardly Dog for the entire month of October. It was a fun time. But yeah, go check that out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!